Hello, my friends. I'm Rick, and this is your seat at the table, and we are looking at Tukayyid, Battle Text, issue 1685 by Jeffrey Layton. This is a FASA product. And at the end of the day, this basically is a complete breakdown or a major run-through of all the main encounters that took place between the clans and the Com Guards on Tukayyid during this great battle to end, or at least stymie for a short while, the invasion of the Inner Sphere by the clans. And if you're looking for stuff for your battle horse or for recreating certain specific battles, or to give yourself an idea of what might be an encounter between the clans and the guards and or other forces, this is a great book for that. If nothing else, just from a historic perspective, the lore perspective, it gives us a deeper view of what took place and how it plays out. So we get the introduction, how to use the book, the scenarios, unit setup and game masters, hidden units, point blank shots, playing the clans, clan honor, game use, how to use clan honor in the game perspective, dueling rules, physical attacks, retreating from battle, batchall rules, playing the clans. We got some additional extra clan mechs like the Wolfhound 2C, playing the Com Guards using the Tamo bunker, Com Guards mechs. The Black Knight is introduced in this, or followed up. We got the champion via the 3N champion and the 400D Hussar. And this would be the BLB Knight, so this is the basic Black Knight. A lot of these machines, the King Crab, these showed up in 3050, 3055 TROs, I'm pretty sure, or the 2575 TRO in the Star League technical readout manual. Unit acquisitions, deployment, determining point values, successor states deployment, Com Guards deployment, clan deployment, choosing forces, unit acquisition, bidding rules, unit acquisition tables, average tonnage table, unit acquisition tables. We got Ghost Moor mechs, Nova Cat mechs, Jade Falcon, Smoke Jaguar, Diamond Shark, Steel Viper, Wolf, and they pronounce it W-O or W-U-L-F. Right, all right. Second line mechs for all clans, Com Guard vehicles, Com Guard mechs. Then we have the campaign with the Smoke Jaguars. It gives you an intro into the scenario, Rain of Fire, game setup, battle in the Delta, situation, Rasish River Delta, Tukayyid, ambush at Dinju Pass, bringing the trap, situation Dinju Pass, Tukayyid, battle for Tamor Bunker, situation Tamo Mountains, Tukayyid. Excuse me. On a caveat, what makes this important, because unlike the houses, all houses have large mercenary commands. Almost all factions have command and control centers and places for their high command or their generals or the commanding officer of the situation tries to get the strategic and tactical overview of what's going on so they can better to respond and to position and reposition their forces. The clans have some distinct advantages in this avenue because some of their major warships have these built into their command structure. It's right there. They have the big vast holo tanks and things like this. Although it goes against the clan nature to lead from the rear. Most of their cons, their clan command is in the field with their people, which poses its own challenges when they're trying to look at a much vaster conflict than the localized situation that those commanders tend to be in. Meanwhile, though, they have the technology, they have some advantages in that aspect over the houses. the houses do the best they can with what they have, but they lack the Starlink era technology and the advances from since then in many cases. This is not always the case, but in most cases. This is like if you're familiar with the headquarters vehicles, those big differences between units that have them because they get advantages for having them in gameplay, uh, as opposed to those who have vintage era Starlink versions that have all the high tech equipment and the fusion power plants to run them. They give them superior uh, tactical computers and display units and things like this, as opposed to the later succession war era versions of these things that are internal combustion engines and using dumbed down computers and physical maps as opposed to holographic maps, and so on and so forth. So the comm guards had the advantage of having a complete Starlink command and control bunker built. So they built and installed this bunker where Attachus Fuchs, the percenter marshal himself, using a holographic interactive system, allowed him to integrate himself into the battle on all levels, from the grand scheme of the entire world defense down to the individual combat. And he could intercede, he could direct, he could counteract orders if necessary, as he sees the bigger picture that his field commanders were not able to see. And this gave him, the comm guards, a very healthy advantage. It also allowed them to take advantage of the clan's tendency to fight individually. Even as a group, the clans themselves are very bad at this. It goes against their nature and their warrior dogma and their belief system. This really causes them more harm than good in the long run. It's like their tendency to ignore the logistics realities of long-term combat. It's one of those, when I walk into those what if scenarios, I can't help but wonder sometimes, what if the clans had invaded the inner sphere in force? Instead of sending the handful of clans that they bid down to come in, and then later reinforce them with a couple of additional clans that were there if they needed them, what if all 16 clans in force had descended on the inner sphere with the sole unified thought of reaching Terra? A competition between these 16 clans of who gets to Terra first, but the fact would be that you had a whole lot more resources, a whole lot more manpower, a whole lot more tactical and strategic options available to them by doing this. And perhaps they would have invaded from multiple fronts. Obviously, trying to funnel all 16 clans through the same slice at the first initial 4 and then 6 were focused on, not likely. But if you had 2 or 3 avenues of advance where the inner sphere houses are every one of them are now engaged against the clans for fight for survival, how different would the game played out? How different would be the scene and the current eras be if that had been the take that FASA had chose instead of the take that they did? We'll never know. Anyway, so that's why that particular scenario is important. And a small smoke jaguar unit gets close to the bunker, and the bunker's defenders have to defend it. Had they successfully conquered the defenders and taken the bunker out, or discovered its importance, how the Battle of Tukayyid might have been much different. It may not have. It just might have been even more costly and bloody for the comm guards than it was. So we got campaign versus the clan Novacat, which basically, for the most part, they make a bold insertion and damn near get obliterated in the process. They've lost before the first rounds of combat even breaks loose. So ambush from the depths. Game setup for Clan Novacat, ComStar's counterattack, turning the tables, so on and so forth. Then we got campaign versus the Clan Ghost Bears, pummeling the bears, sudden death situation, foothills near Tukayyid, Forest Inferno, out of the frying pan situation, Hoth Forest Tukayyid, and we got Clan Ghost Bear. Of the clans, Clan Ghost Bear in part came the closest to achieving their goals because they tend to be a bit more methodical about what they do. They're smart enough to look at what the other clans are doing and try to learn from those mistakes, or at least attempt to avoid them. They did, in part, kind of listen to Kerensky about what they should and shouldn't do, although still typical, the clans did their own thing. Their logistics were just a little better, but not much. But they came real close, as opposed to Clan Wolf, who had all the advantages stacked in their favor. And mostly in part because they were manipulated by their own Ilkhan Kerensky to put them in that position. By invading last, they had an opportunity to watch and observe how the ComGuard was going to operate, how the failures of the other clans played out, how to try to avoid those. They also understood that Kerensky had begun to understand how the inner sphere operated much sooner than this, and started trying to take that into account. He landed with more supplies. He did a better job of protecting his logistics chain as much as he could. He also encouraged his commanders to outfit their mechs and their units as much as possible with energy-based weapons to reduce the amount of material needs. And that's something we often I don't want to say, we tend to ignore. We tend to ignore the large-scale logistics of how all this stuff is actually going to work. Yes, we need munitions, we need missiles, we need auto-cannon reloads, we need parts to repair replacement armor to repair damage in the field. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's consumables, there's fuel, there's food, there's potable water, there's medical supplies, there's just a whole staggering amount of materials, and this is what's made or made or broke many a combat or a war and over the centuries, because something has either been gone south in the supply chain, or the battle has gone on so long that it's starting to become impractical or impossible to keep supplied. And the further away you are from your logistics or base, the worse that gets. And that plays out even more so in the future. We see it in modern era stuff today. There's conflict going on over between Russia and the Ukraine, the Russians are losing, and they're grossly larger than the Ukraine. They have grossly bigger military, and they're still losing. In part because they have crappy commanders, they have a bad logistics system, and they're totally woefully underestimated their opponent. And their opponent also's logistics system is becoming a bit dodgy. They're having issues too. They're being propped up by NATO in the West. If it wasn't for NATO in the West, we wouldn't be talking about this. It would have been a done deal. But at the current date, as of now, and I'm doing this morning of Thanksgiving Day. We got some friends coming over this afternoon, and we got a busy weekend, so I'm just getting my videos done a little early. And they were talking on the news this morning that by all experts' estimates, the Russians have burned through 50% of their long-range rockets and missiles, mostly, things like cruise missiles and stuff like that, because they're massively targeting Ukraine's infrastructure, mostly in its energy area, trying to knock out the ability for the civilians to weather the winter that's now here. So the same thing plays out here, and a number of the clans would have been doomed even if they were successful in opening bids to their conflict. Their logistic chains would have crippled them. Excuse me. And Fuchs knew this, and he also planned for a long campaign. He actually sells that to some point. I read that recently in one of the other books. Excuse me a minute. There we go. Well, I don't know. I thought that was paused. Maybe it wasn't. If you heard me coughing and running through this, my apologies. Just first thing in the morning, we had breakfast, and I always seem to get a tickle in my throat no matter what I do. So, Fuchs figured this out and also planned, he told his commanders to do everything they could to stretch the battle out. Hit, fade, attack, retreat, give ground, attack again, give ground. We'll focus here, then we'll disperse. Drag it out. If possible, take out the clan's logistics supply bases. Find their bases, knock them out. That's important. Plus, he dispersed the ComGuard's resupply system, so they weren't concentrated in a handful of places. They were spread out, which is kind of unclan-like, which was another thing that was a detriment to the clans at this era. Anyway, campaign for Jade Falcon, and this is one of the most well-known ones because they're part of the Jade Falcon trilogy, the series of novels, and they talk about in it, part of this. So this is some of the best written out version. Assault on Robin's Crossing, Qual the City, Death, the City of Death, Sacrificial Lambs, Qual Tukayyid, which basically was a big trap, Pride's Pride, Blaze of Glory, Fresno Plain on Tukayyid, and we get Clan Diamond Shark, the Death of the 85th, a Horrific Victory. That was a common theme that on Tukayyid, that a lot of smaller unit conflict saw the clans win out over the engagement, but the sheer cost that they couldn't, in machines and warriors that couldn't be replaced readily, cost them. There were many times when they should have not pressed the battle, should they have withdrawn and reassessed the situation instead of being gung-ho the way that the typical clan mindset. And once again, the ComGuards lured them in and used their own tactics, their own ideology against them again and again and again. And this is a big part what lets the ComGuards win out over the concentrated clans that were there. So campaign against the Clan Steel Vipers, Descent into Hell, Devil's Bath on Tukayyid, Caravan Carnage, Situation Countryside near Viper Drop Zone Tukayyid. One of those opportunities that the ComGuards used to take out most of Clan Steel Viper's logistics dump. They had concentrated all their supplies into one spot and invited them to be destroyed, and they did, and that pretty much ended their campaign and any chances for them to succeed. There just is the way it went. Some of them were beat by their own tactics or lack thereof, and their arrogance or ignorance, depending on how you look at it. So then we get into campaign for Clan Wolf, and of course Wolf being the poster child of the clans, did so much better and blah 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 because they're the wolves, right? They're the dominant, blah blah blah. Wolf Triumphant, Spoils of War, Situation Outskirts of Bezo, Tukayyid. So even though the Clan Wolf took both of them, their engagement took both of their objective cities, the clans as a whole still lost and had to abide by the 15-year truce. And history shows how things went different after that, right? So we have Battle for Tukayyid. Bloodbath begins. An excerpt from ComStar classified report. Blah blah blah. Sanctum beta level clearance. ComStar learned the clan's true goal was their invasion and ensure was to conquer Terra and use it as a base for recreating the Star League. Presenter Marshal Fuchs and Primus Waterley together decides to plan to defeat the clans and preserve Terra. Sure, she did. She had much more plans, more grandiose plans, and it cost them all. Right? So, anyway, what do you call a battle space player without tech readout 3057? Beat. Right? Yeah. Okay. So, this is a good book. I've never had an opportunity to try to recreate any of the battle scenes or anything like that. That's not what it did, but I bought it because it gave me a lot of insight, more detailed insight into what was going on the combat side of things for Tukayyid. There's bigger source books with better information on the story side of things, the lore side of things. But that said, this is still a good one, and I don't know if you can get your hands on it or not. If you can, you can. Might be lucky. There might be somebody's done aftermarket um, PDF files. Like I said, that'd be something if somebody had the resources and the time to take their books and scan them all into a PDF format so they could reproduce them on the internet. Uh, I would think that the game companies, Catalyst right now, probably they have to have some kind of inventory of physical. Even if they got a library of a handful of all their material, and if as corporations go, if they didn't, and it didn't get passed on from company to company as part of the acquisitions, that's kind of foolish in my mind. It's just, this doesn't make sense to me. It's possible. I mean, nothing's not impossible, but if they did have it, the means to PDF everything that goes all the way back, I think it would be well worth their effort and time to do that. But that's just my personal opinions. Anyway, this is Rick, and my coughing aside, hope you guys have a great holiday. Until next time. My friends, this is Rick, and hey, if you like the channel, please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, tell your buddies, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, tell anybody else that's in the gaming industry